leopard, in fact, Karula's daughter in the case of Tundi, crossed into Voyatella. Oh dear. Okay, well, it sounds as though there isn't any sound and that you can't hear me, so hi! We're going to try and fix things. Welcome.
Not on our side, they got levels.
Cool.
Not on our side, they got levels.
Well, that's interesting. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, or possibly watching on YouTube, apparently you have sound, so at least you caught my introduction. And you know you've got a sort of added advantage on the rest of the viewers, because you'll know what's happening. I will do a repeat for those of you watching without sound. And of course, if you are watching without sound, you have little to no idea, unless you are very gifted lip readers, little to no idea about what I'm actually saying. And I promise to repeat my introduction for those of you who can't hear me. Let us know once you get sound, or if you can hear me. It's great to have that information. And while you're at it, don't forget to send through your questions and your comments to hashtags. The joys of live safaris and all of the technological advances that we have made. Does mean every now and again things go just ever so slightly wrong. Okie dokie. And the volume is up, the sound is going. Alrighty, let's try that once again. Good afternoon, everybody, for the second time around. For those of you who missed my introduction, I'm going to paraphrase it ever so slightly. My name is Jamie. I have Dave on camera with me this afternoon, and we have all kinds of exciting things planned for you. Now, the reason that I've come across in this direction is there were reports that Tundi and Tingana, a male and female leopard, crossed into Djuma. Now, actually, I was going to go and look for the lions first. However, Mr. Brent Leo Smith, who is going to be out on tracking team, made a very bold statement that he was going to find the mating leopards before I did. And thus, we find ourselves embroiled in a competition to see who can find them first. Now, luckily for us, we have a bit of a head start, and I feel as though it is my duty to present Dave with his first leopard sighting since he started working for WildEarth. He's grinning away in the back. I don't think he objects. We are coming to you live, which means that we never know what you can expect around the next corner. And we are coming to you live from Djuma and Arathusa Game Reserves in the Sabi Sands area, the Greater Kruger National Park of South Africa. A place known for its vibrant and incredible wildlife experience that promises all kinds of magical moments. It's just a matter of finding them. This morning, VM and myself experienced one such magical moment where we followed alarm calls of the shouting impala. They dashed across the road, and we came face to face with one of the lionesses from the Nkuhuma, I suspect from the Nkuhuma Pride. Obviously don't know for certain, but it makes complete sense since they were there yesterday. And there's nothing really that I can think of. There's something about seeing big cats on foot that is a really incredible experience to enjoy. Unfortunately, it happened so quickly we didn't manage to get it on camera for you, but I'm sure we will be following up there soon. And back to Debbie and Zumi Jules, who updated us about the presence of Karula. We just have too many options this afternoon. So many things to head out and find. But Debbie and Zumi Jules let us know that Karula was on the Djuma Dam camera in the morning. And we did actually happen to see that. As I was saying earlier, we were sitting in final control and we were busy doing a sort of a feedback meeting, work upon our presenting skills, our bringing you the best possible show. And she just happened to wander on screen. And I know that Zumi Jules, I think it was actually your comment that I read earlier, to say how what a wonderful job the Zoomy, the person in control of that particular camera, did in managing to follow her as she moved across and over the dam wall. Absolutely, I think it was a fantastic job. And just to let you know, if she is in the Mawati drainage line, I won't be following up there. It is a perfect place for her to be hiding any cubs that she may have. Instead, we are on the search for mating leopards, the noisiest that you will ever experience leopards, in a great way to help us find them. So while I go find a nice spot to sit and listen in silence, let's find out what Mr. Hendry has to say to you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Rusty, the recalcitrant and deeply rusting vehicle that we are now currently driving around Djuma on. It is a very pleasant afternoon, very hot, gorgeous skies though, and that is a buffalo bull. We're sitting here at Galago Pan, and the reason we're sitting at Galago Pan is because there is a kudu just over there, and it is staring intently into the bush. Oh, sorry, my head's in the way. It's staring intently into the bush, and I'm wondering if it isn't perhaps looking at the lioness that Jamie saw this morning on foot. Either the lioness, or indeed the lioness and all her friends that belong to the Nkuhuma Pride. I'm a little suspicious as to whether that is exactly what's going on, because the buffalo look particularly relaxed with life. That might just be because they're not particularly afraid of a few female lions. They should be, of course. The Nkuhuma Pride is renowned for its devouring of buffalo flesh. There they are. Just two of them today. So what we'll do is we'll just sneak around the side of the kudu there and just check that she hasn't seen something. She may also have smelt something, of course. That's also possible. So, good afternoon, my name is James, in case you were wondering who this person waffling on at you in a strange accent is. My name is James, and Brian is on camera. Brian's thumb is beautifully decorated. There we go, wonderful. Now, as Jamie, I'm sure, told you, we are on a live safari, and that means that you please must talk to us. Hashtag SafariLIVE, questions@wildearth.tv. Send us your comments, send us your questions, but send us your impressions as well. Tell us how you feel about the animals that we see. Tell us about any trips that you might have planned to South Africa or Africa. Ask us any questions you might like to have, or that you might have about traveling to Africa. There are many misconceptions about travel in Africa, and so we'd love to dissuade any of those that there might be. Now, I'm just going to stop here and peer into the bush where the kudu was peering. I think there's something in there. Tammy Whiting, you're on YouTube and you want to know where all of the giraffe are. Tammy, I don't know where all of the giraffe are. I suspect a few of them are sitting around Sydney's dam. We've seen a few there over the last little while, a little bull, at least a large bull, and a little calf, and a female giraffe who the bull is trying to attend to with a great enthusiasm. But otherwise, Tammy, we haven't seen a great number of giraffe. Now, that's because giraffe, of course, are nomadic. They don't have set territories. They probably have a home range, which they probably don't stray too far from, but they absolutely do not have a set territory. And so the fact that we sometimes see a great swathe of them, you know, up to 30 at a time is the biggest herd I've seen here. And the fact that we don't see that all the time is not surprising. So they will come and go, Tammy. I'm just going to stick my nose, or not my nose, the nose of Rusty, into the edge of the bush there and just see. I think this kudu would alarm call if she'd actually seen a lion, but I think she might have smelt the lion. There tends to be a slight northerly breeze this afternoon, sorry. It is an afternoon, well, where we are, so afternoon, of course. So let's just put our noses in here and peer through the bush. So we'll just have a scan through here. Now, I was chatting about travel, just while we look in the undergrowth there and see if we can't see the tawny, telltale colour of a lion's stomach or back.
WildEarth movers out in the north.
And Gerda, you are traveling to these parts in March, which is very exciting. You're coming to the Sabi Sands or the Kruger, I'm not sure which exactly, and you say it's going to be like going home. Well, Gerda, you will not be surprised to hear that that is the reaction of many returned travelers to African destinations, is that this primal and ancient land tends to fill people with a sense that they have returned back to some kind of ancient root. Now, let's just... Did you see anything in there, Brian? No. Right. Okay. We're going to go and do a loop around to where Jamie last saw the lioness. Let's see if we can't find her there. And while we do that, we are talking about a lioness, of course. And Ryan, excuse me, there are many flies today. Ryan, you want to know why we don't see any male lions ever? Well, Ryan, it is a slightly perplexing situation that we find ourselves in. There are plenty of male lions around, but we seem to be sort of between two territories, which means that neither the Salati males to the north of us, who occupy the territory to the north, nor the Birmingham boys to the south of us feel a particular need to come onto this reserve and protect it. Now, that is not entirely unusual. Djuma is not a huge piece of land. If you come on safari here, you will traverse a lot more land than we do. We traverse 1,500 hectares. You'd probably traverse about 3 or 4 times that, in which case you would definitely see a male lion in the course of a 3 or 4 day safari. This just seems to be, at the moment, between two territories. Now, should the Salati males push further south and start roaring, I've no doubt the Birmingham boys would come north and there would be a conflagration and we'd see both of them. But at the moment, that just isn't happening. And the Birmingham boys are not feeling that this part of their territory is threatened, and so they're not bothering to come up here and defend it. They're lurking further south, where there is a bit more threat from the southern animals in the Sabi Sands, and also possibly from the Western Majingalan coalition. I think that's the best answer I can give you at the moment. But there are plenty of male lions around in the Sabi Sands, Ryan. Especially down in the south. Now, Jamie was walking through this bush area here this morning, and she, on her walk, had a wonderful experience, and that was to see this lioness on foot. We heard the alarm calling from the camp, and she and Steph, of course, were in there with Viam, and they went rushing towards the alarm calls, and there they found a lioness, seemingly on the hunt. Now, Scott also had tracks of another lion going north across the boundary into Buffelshoek. So whether this lioness has been split from them or whether that was another pride coming on, I'm not sure. Now, 16-year-old Kari, you're in Costa Rica, and as we drive along searching for signs of this lioness, you want to know what Brian's favorite animal is. Brian? What is the warthog? Really?
I love warthogs.
Oh, Brian loves warthogs. Okay, any particular reason, Brian?
No, it's always just piqued my interest.
They pique your interest, they have the right vibe.
Yeah.
Right, warthogs, there we go. And you also want to know what our scariest, or my scariest, experience has been. Well, my scariest experience ever, I suppose, was probably breaking up with a girlfriend at one stage, but I mean, that of course is not what you mean. You mean the scariest experience in the bush. And my scariest experiences in the bush have normally revolved around actually elephants or buffalo that I have surprised on foot. Now, when they surprise you on foot, of course, no, when you surprise them on foot, they can get quite upset and come towards you, and that can be a quite hairy situation. So I've had a few incidences like that, probably when some buffaloes stand up and they look at you and they come a few steps forward. That is pretty terrifying. But this is not a particularly terrifying place, and one of the most unterrifying things in the bush, two of the most unterrifying things in the bush, one being Jamie Patterson, the other some giraffe. Let's go and take a look.
How very alliterative. Jamie and the giraffe. Well, Tammy, I hope that you are still watching, because sighting is for you and all of those who are fans of the tallest creature that we find out here on the Sabi Sands. A lovely large male giraffe, complete with an accompaniment or a crown of oxpeckers settled on the top of his head. There you can see those bald patches around the top of those horns, or ossicones as they are officially known. And that is what tells us that, or one of the factors that tells us that you are looking at a male giraffe and not a female. They tend to rub the top of their ossicones smooth. And there you can see the oxpeckers hopping around on the top of his head, making sure to help keep him tick and parasite, if not free, then at least reduce the amount. And what I love about watching giraffes like this when they're ruminating is, if you look really, really carefully, as he swallows this next mouthful, which he will do... No, don't... Ah, that wasn't very considerate, boy. I was about to say, if you look carefully, you'll be able to see the bulge of the next ball of cud as he brings it up that long, long neck, using a powerful reverse peristalsis to bring it up against gravity. Well, that was terribly inconvenient. Very camera shy, mister. Just the little nostrils peeking out and the long eyelashes. This also gives me the perfect opportunity to do exactly what my plan is for the start of this afternoon's drive, which is actually to sit and listen for as long as possible to see if I can catch any sound of Tundi and Tingana mating. My suspicion would be that they're in this drainage line. Let's see if I can get you another slightly clearer view. Oh dear. He's hidden himself perfectly. Here we go. Hello. Pecking away at the top of the prominent bulge on this giraffe's skull. The males, it's one of the other ways, apart from those thicker and more defined ossicones at the top of his head, much more solid looking than those of a female. But that lump on the top of the head also serves a very similar purpose and is used when giraffe participate in what's known as necking, where they has a far more violent connotation than the human version of necking. Generally, they swing their heads around and smack each other on the sides, the rump and the legs. And the amount of momentum that they gather is phenomenal. Now, we're looking at our South African subspecies of giraffe. It is the only one that we find here, but Leo was wondering, how many different subspecies do we get? Well, out here, as I said, only this one, but Leo's obviously known a little bit about giraffe and knows about the fact that there are different types throughout Africa. This is quite a significant mouthful he's munching. It's taking a long time to chew this ball of cud. Well, Leo, it's a matter that is up for debate, and it tends to oscillate, depending on which scientific paper you read, between 7 and about 9. Now, Leo, what I should do is list all of them off the top of my head, and for some reason the only one I can think of apart from the Rothschild, and there's the Rothschild, the Maasai giraffe, the South African giraffe. And Leo, if you give me a moment, my brain will dredge up the memories of the remaining names of the subspecies. I should know them. I do know them off by heart. I'm just having a little struggle for now. But yes, Leo, it depends on who you ask. And subspecies are one of those tricky little things that tend to vex evolutionary biologists and scientists. And hold on a second, Leo. The names are starting to creep back to me. What did I say? I said South African, Rothschild, Maasai, the Thornycroft, the Kordofan, the Nubian, the West African, the Angolan, and the reticulated. Here you go, that's 9 of them for you. But some of those are contested in terms of what makes a subspecies and what is just a slight color variation. Because even with our local giraffe population, and we've spoken a lot about this, we've got a nice dark male here, but they come with their own varieties of colors and spot patterns. I'm sure some of you have noticed the more star-shaped spots of that one male that we've been seeing regularly that has been courting the females. And this gentleman has much more defined borders along his spots, and one very peaceable, or two very peaceable oxpeckers sitting on its head. Well, there you go. Paul's question that stems further from the question that Leo asks. Paul wants to know, are these Thorncroft or are they Rothschild's giraffe? And the answer, Paul, is neither. It is actually a species, a subspecies known as the South African giraffe. I always want to call it the Saharan giraffe. Oh, not the Saharan, sorry, the what do I want to call it? A bushveld giraffe. That's always the name that pops into my head, but it's officially known as the South African giraffe. The Rothschild and the Thorncroft subspecies occurring further north and towards the more central areas of the country. Yeah, lots of oxpeckers fluttering around, hoping to join the party. Chirping away, and I spoke about this morning on the bushwalk and the value of listening to the sounds of the oxpecker. This poor giraffe. Sorry, I'm just looking. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, and they've all taken off. Fluttering off. At one point there, our gentleman giraffe had about 5 oxpeckers sitting on his head. What a tolerant gentleman. And the one remaining oxpecker, king of the castle, sitting at the top. Oh, 2. Sorry, there were 2, so that means he must have had 6 on his head. I might be imagining things, but nope, he did it again. He's winking at us. Definitely, I think he's winking at you, Dave.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, definitely. He decided to plant himself behind a bush and then give us a teasing wink in our direction, as if to say, yeah, he will only film my head today. And there we go. I wanted to show you the way that the ball of cud that he's currently chewing moves down the neck and the next one is brought up. Unfortunately, he's decided to make that impossible for us to do. But we have got a lovely view of those wonderful long eyelashes. And Adrian, or Adrien, sorry, please correct me if you want to, just let me know if I'm saying your name wrong. I think it's Adrien. You were wondering, how do you tell the difference between a male and a female giraffe? Now, the best way, because this is quite often the view that you have of a giraffe, is to have a look at those ossicones on the top of its head. And where they are thick and well defined, with a bald patch on the top, that usually denotes a male. The females have thinner ossicones with tufts of hair that hide the top part of it. They haven't been rubbed smooth by fighting in the same way the males have. The other way, Adrian, is the usual way with most mammal species. I'm sure, as you know, it's not always that easy. For example, elephants have internal testicles. So do hippo, so do rhino. Can make it a little bit tricky, but in the case of the giraffe, as shy as he is being, there is also the obvious difference, and it's quite clear in giraffe if you do manage to get that particular view of them. I've also read a theory about the shape of their backs and the fact that maybe males have slightly more flat flat back in the case of the males compared to the sloping back of the females. And Randall, I mentioned that this was the tallest species that we get out here. And Randall, who's watching in Illinois, would like to know, well then, how tall does a giraffe get? And the answer is up to about 5-ish meters in height, right to the top of their head. Their shoulder height is probably in the region of 2.5 to 3 meters. And the head height adds another extra 2 or so meters on top of that, if not 2.5. Randall, to convert that, since you are from Illinois and therefore do not work in the metric system, to give you a rough conversion, it is about 15 to 16 feet for a relatively average-sized giraffe. Yes, I'm talking about you, boy. It's interesting, this is the exact spot where I saw that dark-colored female a couple of days ago, or just before I went on leave, actually. She is far more skittish than he is. He's not really being uncooperative. He just happened to want to eat those particular leaves in that area. And Leo's got a really, really good question. As the clouds have been rolling in this afternoon, bringing, as always, empty or fairly empty promises of rain. Leo's got a very good point. Since they are so incredibly tall, do they ever get struck by lightning? Or do they instinctively know which areas to avoid? Leo, they do get struck by lightning. It is, in fact, quite a common cause of death. Less so in this mixed bush willow woodland that is our habitat and our ecosystem. But in areas where there are large clearings, it is not at all uncommon for giraffe to be killed in thunderstorms. And in fact, that applies to quite a few of the animal species. I once came across what I could only describe as almost carnage. I walked out and found a load of dead impala all scattered around under this burnt and damaged tree. And my only conclusion was that they had been struck by lightning. They hadn't even been fed on yet. There were about 10 dead impala around a very large tree. So instinct doesn't necessarily protect them. It was a very interesting sight. It wasn't particularly pleasant, and I have to say that the smell was quite interesting, quite overwhelming. I also participated once in game capture to capture some giraffe that were being moved since the rest of the group had actually been wiped out in lightning strikes. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with South African climates, the storms out here can be absolutely phenomenal, awe-inspiring and terrifying at the same time. Those of us from Joburg are particularly well nuanced. And while I was visiting my parents there over the last few days, we had 2 massive thunderstorms that had the animals cowering under the beds, and in fact I think took out the pool motor. There was a very large flash and bang and click, and all the lights went out. Thank you, boy. You're off on a mission. I wonder if he knows where the leopards are hiding. I bet you he does. But giraffe know how to keep their secrets. Well, I'm going to try for one last view of our gentleman, since he's being so pleasant. While I do that, ooh, Jigger, just for those of you well versed in the mechanics of cars, Jigger's universal joint has decided to start going. So we're going to be very, very gentle with Jigger. Now, having chatted a little bit about the different subspecies, it's raised one more question in Pamela's mind. Are there any giraffe in North Africa? Now, there would have been at one stage, and of course the name has come from those Greek explorers, or the Arabic explorers, who sort of were moving about in the northern parts of Africa. I have to be completely honest with you, Pamela. I'm pretty sure there are still established populations there, but there are, of course, the further north into those areas of Africa that you go, not counting, I'm talking more about the sub-Saharan and the Ethiopia, Eritrea, those sorts of areas. Anywhere caught up in civil strife or civil conflict, their wildlife populations automatically suffer. And something like a giraffe would definitely count as a meal for a lot of desperate people. I'm fairly certain there are still surviving populations. There are some amazing African parks in that area of the world that have considerably large protected areas and great areas of bushveld. I'm sure that there are giraffe populations around up there. It's on my wish list of places to go and explore those further northern areas that I've never been to. I think we shall leave our gentleman giraffe. That also is very nicely alliterative. But before I do, Whitney has a question about subspecies and species, and she was saying, with all of these subspecies of giraffe, and you did mention zebra, and I'm going to get to those in a second, Whitney, but you meant particularly with subspecies of giraffe, do they ever interbreed? And that's the thing. That is where a lot of the confusion comes in terms of the subspecies versus species classification. It's always that fine dividing line. And one of the definitions that evolutionary biologists and biologists use is whether or not a species will mate with another or mate with that particular animal in terms of deciding if it is a species, if it is a different species or just a subspecies. I'm sure I could have worded that better, Whitney. I hope you followed what I was trying to say there. Essentially, yes, that all of the subspecies of giraffe can interbreed, they can produce, and they produce viable offspring. So a lot of different species, for example, a horse and a donkey, then can interbreed to produce a mule. Sorry, Whitney. That didn't sound like mating leopards, actually. That sounded more like impala entertaining themselves. It was a sound, but not the proper which is my best mating leopard impression. I hope you all enjoyed it. Something that I do on a regular basis and generally don't do very well. Whitney, sorry, yes, to get back to your question, I got completely distracted by those impala acting silly. It's not rutting time. I don't know why they're making such a noise. Whitney, with the species of zebra, they're not subspecies. The different species of zebra are distinctive species, but they can still reproduce. I think I might have to go and investigate there a little bit later. It's not the sound of mating leopards. It's almost certainly impala rutting. They're being incredibly vocal. And also, of course, many of our regular viewers will be familiar with the idea that quite often what's happened when Tingana's brought another female onto the property and into Karula's territory, even where that other female is her daughter, she doesn't really appreciate it. She very often follows the sound of them. And I wonder if that's not what brought her out this afternoon to decide to go and have a drink and then make her way down the Mulwati drainage line. That's a mystery that we may or may never solve. In the meantime, I'm going to head in that direction, but first I want to go and check a treehouse dam. As our regular viewers know, leopard mating is a thirsty and exhausting process. The female doesn't really let the male have a moment's breather. And Tingana, for all the aspersions cast upon his sterility over the last few weeks and second-guessing him, has certainly managed to keep up with all of the females in the area. But it's a hot day today. It is 36 degrees, which is 96 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. And I suspect that maybe top on Tingana's priority list might be to go and have a drink. So while we head to Treehouse Dam, let's find out how James's lion tracking is going.
There's a Savannah bottle in there. Now, we were we were trying desperately to find tracks of the lions in the bush there. I'm afraid we didn't find them at all. I didn't even find a sign of a lion, and I walked deep into the block, into the drainage line, and found nothing. So I think she's probably headed off north, perhaps towards where the rest of the pride were. That's I think what's happened. I'm not sure exactly. We're going to keep watching the road for tracks, and we'll see what pops out at the other end. What I do want to do as well, though, is show you some of these amazing cloud formations, and we'll do that once we get onto a high point, which will be Buffelshoek Cut Line, and then we'll be able to show you some astonishing cloud formations as we go. Now, lions, of course, are not renowned for doing much during a hot day like this. They would normally be sitting about or lying about underneath a bush, trying not to be too hot, and the most physical activity that they'll engage in is to shake their ears or so, flick that pom-pom tail about and chase away the flies, of which there are many. Many of the insects are struggling in the lack of rain, but the flies, it would seem, are having a good time of it, especially these little biting flies. I'm not sure what kind they are exactly. They're deeply unpleasant, and I wish for them nothing but the most unpleasant demise. Now, Donna, you have been watching for a while, and obviously you know the Nkuhuma Pride well, and you want to know about where Junior is and if anyone's heard from him. Now, for those of you who don't know, Junior is now a 4-year-old male lion. He's no longer a sub-adult, and he has left the Pride, which is totally normal, of course, but we don't know where he's gone. And Donna, the last I heard of him, he was on Mala Mala, and I don't think he was doing anything other than trying to stay out of the way of the Birmingham boys. I suspect that will remain the same, and he will eventually disappear off into Kruger, perhaps. I think that's actually probably where he is at the moment. He might come back every so often to visit the pride that he was born into, except I think it's probably got beyond that point. Well, one doesn't ever want to say definitely. And then there were two cheetah also asked after by Donna, but a different Donna, not the same Donna. Hello, Donna of the cheetah. We'll have Donna of the lions and Donna of the cheetah. Donna of the cheetah have not been heard of again since this morning. I'm pretty sure they're in the same place. I haven't heard anything further about them. We will be going sort of towards the northeast at some stage, and then down towards the Torchwood cut line on the Gari Main, which is of course the southeast, and we'll see if we can't pick up something there, but I've heard nothing further about them during the course of the day. I'm just peering into the bush, of course, trying to find that tawny shape. Now, Dawn, you're in Chicago, and I asked about travel to the Sabi Sands, and you're coming to the Sabi Sands soon. Dawn, that's wonderful news. I'd love to know which lodge you're going to stay at. And you want to know about etiquette in the bush and what you should and shouldn't do. Well, Dawn, we dress for dinner, so you must be sure to bring black tie for your dinners. In the evenings, then, of course, women are expected to wear long dresses throughout the day. Despite the heat, a nice sort of camisole umbrella is also a good idea if we're on drive. There are some kudu over there. And the other thing you need, Dawn, of course, is to understand that I'm talking absolute nonsense. Those are kudu, of course, young male and some females, or one female, two young males and a female. Dawn, there's no real etiquette other than the most important thing that you can remember when you come out here is that you must ask as many questions as you want to of your guide, and you must immerse yourself as completely as possible, trying to spend a bit of time on foot and try and just dig into the knowledge base of the tracker and the ranger that you're with, because I think that's the way you're going to get the most out of your trip. In terms of etiquette, well, you'll get a safety briefing for game drive, so I mean, it's pretty obvious stuff. Don't stand up, don't shout at the animals, don't feed them oranges and that sort of thing. And they'll give you all of that before you arrive. And then the only other thing I would suggest, Dawn, is that you read as much about the area as you can before you come, because that way you can ask more in-depth questions and you can get a much better idea and a much more sort of immersive and holistic view of the Sabi Sands and the bush in general. Look at this male. Isn't he wonderful? He's very relaxed. Very young. That horn has just about done a half turn, so he's only about a year old. Now, the kudu's horns do 2 twists, at least a full twist every 2 years. He's got about half a twist there, so I'd put him at a year. There goes the female. Very, very kind of them to walk across the road in front of us at such a gentle pace. And clearly, if they are sitting in here, they're not particularly worried about being nailed by some lions that could be close by. Now, the kudu have crossed over the road, and Brian, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Jamie has got some of your favorite animals. Let's head across to some pigs.
I'm actually quite ashamed to admit that I had absolutely no idea that they were Brian's favorite animals. I will make a definite, constant attempt now that I know that to show Brian warthogs. Now, you may be seeing one on your screens. There are, in fact, 2 warthogs there. The second is hiding in that pit off to the left of the one warthog, where the elephants have dug through to get to water. That wonderful little hidey hole. that is in there, and I don't think you can even... Oh, there, you can see its bottom. You can see its little bottom sticking out over the top there. Yep, there you go, wiggling. Hello! And back down again. Quite an interesting little hidey hole, that. I once discovered, to my shock, a wild dog sleeping in there once. I could see the rest of the pack across the dam, and I blindly went driving across, only to find that there was a little wild dog sleeping in that muddy wallow. And that's exactly what that warthog there is doing, is enjoying a nice drink. One of the few naturally occurring dams, although it has, of course, been helped along by human intervention. But it comes with the underground water that has flowed down from the seep lines in the area, including that of around Zoe's Road. And what that means is when the elephants come by and have a nice deep dig in the mud, they bring up fresh, clean, clear water to the benefit of all of the animals, including these little warthog. Spoken before about them having the potential to be fairly hard hit by the drought. There's a lot of thin-looking warthogs wandering about. This one is nice and in good condition. Hello, Piggy. I can't... Oh, there we go. Bit of a fright. I was looking for some spotted cats sleeping around there, but I don't think that that's going to be the case. You can see they're nervous. You can see it in their body language. They're constantly alert, ears moving about, head casting side to side to check for any signs of threats. There were in fact 3 little warthog when we first drove up, but one of them dashed away from us. Generally, I've noticed a trend that the warthog in this area are particularly skittish for some reason. And it's only recently that we've been starting to habituate. Look how nervous it is. Why is it so nervous? What can you smell? Now, I have to be honest, I've just spoken to Brent. He also didn't see any tracks crossing into the area. We're going to try and get hold of Sean from Arethusa, who originally reported it, and see if we can figure out maybe we've got the wrong message about exactly where those leopards crossed into Voyatella. Either way, I think my plan will be to drive a little way up the Mulwati drainage line, far from where Karula was seen disappearing in. I think that the reason they're so nervous is because they're so vulnerable in this position. Well, their nerves definitely feeling a little bit shot, especially if they are smelling or maybe even hearing the sounds of the leopards mating in the vicinity. As I said, it's a noisy, quite a violent experience witnessing 2 leopards mate. The female tends to get somewhat upset with the male, very often turns around and smacks him in the face and kicks him very hard in the belly with her back legs. And that, of course, is because he comes with a barbed penis that actually causes her quite severe discomfort during the act. And so she turns around and kicks him, and that's why you get that brrr sound as they growl at each other. Now, interestingly, James Richards has asked a very, very salient question. I mentioned that sound might attract Karula. James would like to know, would it not attract the attention of the Nkahuma lions? And James, I didn't think of that, actually. I got so distracted by the thought of managing to locate these leopards that thought didn't cross my mind, and it's a really good point. Because yes, it could. Generally what you'll find with situations like that, James, is that it's sub-adults that go and investigate, particularly sub-adult males. Generally the females are less likely to be bothered to go out of their way, particularly on a hot day like this afternoon. So it's possible, but because they're just a group of females, unlikely. But James, you've just cast some interesting thoughts about those sounds that we heard earlier that I said were impala. And I think I'm going to be going to investigate those in a bit. But just one last look at our little bathing warthog. He is climbing down into the hole, and you've got a slightly clearer view. He's remained fairly relaxed in terms of actually letting us observe them. One's still not sure, but the other tucking in to a good solid drink. Hello, little warthog. And just to finish up my answer to James Richards' question, in terms of attracting the attention of the Nkahumas and distance, I can't give you an exact distance, of course, because I'm not entirely sure where these leopards crossed. I haven't seen any of the tracks that were reported. But James, it would be roughly equate to about 2.5 kilometers. So in miles, that's about 1 or so mile in terms of the distance between where I suspect the leopards might be and where the lions were left this morning. Although I believe that James is saying he hasn't found any sign of them. I only saw one Nkuhuma lioness, and I know that Scott did say that he had tracks crossing Buffelshoek cut line. So it's distinctly possible that that lioness was just straggling and decided to go and join the rest of the pride further to the north. There you go, you can see the warthog having a wonderful time. It's okay, little warthog. Little sub-adult. Looks like a little sub-adult male. So most likely the son of the female on the left, still with his mom. I'm fairly certain that's, yep, that looks like a female to me. So, since we chatted about giraffe, male and female warthog, those little protrusions that give the warthogs their names are not warts, they're sort of knobbly pieces of cartilage and hard connective tissue. But females have 2, males have 4. So that is a female that was on the left, and the little male digging in the mud. Now, for those of you wondering a little bit about my rather peculiar leave schedule that occurred over the last few days, Tammy Peterson was wondering why I only took such a short 4-day leave in this particular instance. And Tammy, there's a couple of reasons. One was that Graham and Emily Wallington are in fact on Djuma along with Peter Braat, so the directors of our company are here, and we've been having some interesting meetings about the exciting future prospects to come, and you'll just have to stay tuned. I can't tell you any more than that at the moment, Tammy. So that was certainly meetings that I did not wish to miss, plus the fact that for once it seems as though Brent and myself will be able to coincide with our leave schedules for a couple of days. So we will actually be able to go away together for more than 2 days at a time, which would be really incredibly pleasant and something I am looking forward to. And then there was also the fact that I desperately needed to get home to visit my wonderful parents and help them pack up the house that they are planning on downscaling and selling. And the interesting thing about the life of a guide or a ranger is that generally most of us tend not to have a fixed address for a very long period, extended period of our lives. Very common for us to move about from place to place, which is something that is one of the perks of the job. It's certainly never boring, but it does mean that you end up storing all of your belongings in various places. In this case, it was my parents' house, so I just had to rush back and help them not leave them to organize all of my belongings, which is a task that is daunting to the most courageous of people, and in fact I found nearly impossible. As in terms of organization, I wouldn't say that I'm the tidiest, most organized person in the world. I think that might even be putting it mildly, and I'm sure my mom would actually be able to reaffirm that. It's still thirsty. Thirsty, thirsty little warthog. Rita, that is wonderful news. Rita is one of our regular viewers and has just sent us the most wonderful message. Rita tells us that she is a self-confessed Kruger junkie and will be back in Kruger for 7 days in June, and that on the 8th day she will be coming along to meet us all. Rita, that's fantastic news. I'm really, really excited for you, and I can't wait to get a chance to meet you. I'm sure you'll be able to come and visit us all at the DRC, and possibly even, quite possibly, in fact I'm sure it can be arranged, have a brief sneak peek into final control and the start of the drive at the very least. So wonderful news from Rita, a self-confessed Kruger junkie, and obviously a SafariLIVE, or a lover of our live safaris. And this warthog's definitely calmed down. This has been wonderful. Totally relaxed again. She's still not completely convinced in the same way. In the same way that her little male has relaxed. And oh girl, yes, I see you looking. It's okay. Now if we just have a look at the young male that's still drinking, still incredibly thirsty. Just wanted to show you a little something. See those little tusks coming through? Not even sure you can see them, they're so tiny. Oh, I think he might be deeply insulted about my assessment of his tusks. Don't worry, boy, you'll grow into them one day, or you'll grow them one day. But those tiny little tusks poking through is usually an indication that the warthog that you're looking at is somewhere in the region of about 6 months old, is when they first start to appear. And it's also the stage which they become fully weaned. And he might not just be drinking. Goodness, that shouldn't have been such a difficult sentence to get out. He might not just be drinking, he might also be licking some of the clay mud. It's not impossible. They do that to supplement their vitamins and their minerals in the intake. It's called geophagy. There's a lot of different types of phagy, or styles of eating. Osteophagy, the process of eating bones, is something that warthogs will also participate in. Goodness me, we seem to have wonderful number of visitors coming through. Janet has just sent through a message to say that she will be in Janice has sent through a message to say that she will be coming through to Arethusa. And Janice, you were wondering whether or not the drought is going to affect your game viewing or the number of animals that you see. And never fear, Janet, although it has been a very serious drought, I have to be completely honest to you, Janice. In terms of game viewing, it may be one of the best opportunities you will ever get. And that's because the vegetation is severely lacking, which means that you can see far further into the bush. Plus, you will be coming in winter, which means you've got a really nice chance of seeing some of the nocturnal and slightly rarer species. That and the fact that the animals are isolated to the water holes also means that the prey is much less or much more concentrated around areas, and the predators are tending to enjoy or living the high life, actually. So in terms of predator sightings, it makes for spectacular viewing. In terms of general game sightings, it will be also a fascinating experience because you'll be able to see all of them around the waterhole. And I think I'm going to leave our little warthog sitting at the waterhole. The one in the hole, every now and again, this little head pops up. Now, as you can imagine, that is a really vulnerable position for that little warthog to be in. Luckily, he's got his mom to keep an eye on him. But a leopard could very easily sneak up on him from behind that ledge, and he would be completely none the wiser until it happened, or until it occurred. Now, if we are tracking mating leopards, I can tell you with almost a certainty at this point, given the amount of time that we've spent here, I can almost say for certain that they are not where we are, or not in the vicinity of where we are now. That's because I haven't, while I've been sitting listening, I haven't heard one sound of growling or mating. So Janice, and to Rita as well, such wonderful, wonderful news that we're having visitors come through, and actually that we assisted Rita in overcoming her fear of elephants is also something really exciting. And Janice, just to let you know, the lovely ladies at Final Control have passed your email on to Steph so that he can arrange that you can come and visit us and meet us in the same way that I chatted a little bit about with Rita. And the wonderful thing about that, Janice and to Rita, is although that you get to see the presenters on a fairly regular basis, there is so much more in terms of the team that goes on behind the scenes, both, of course, with our fantastic cameraman, but also the ladies of Final Control, the technological geniuses who keep the team running, Steph, for example, that you don't always get to see. So it's about getting an overall and background impression into what a wonderful team we have here at WildEarth. So Janice, wonderful, wonderful news. I'm thrilled to hear it, and to Rita. And never fear. Never fear. The drought shall not hamper, and in fact it will probably benefit your safari experience. But Enjoy your time nonetheless, and I look forward to meeting you. Right, time to go and take a trip up the Mawati drainage line. While I do that, let's find out what Mr. Henry has been up to.
Nothing at Sydney's dam, I'm afraid. Despite the incredible heat of the afternoon, nothing has come across to have a drink there. That looked like a duiker that just ran across the road. And we were also trying to find some magpie shrikes. There was a young baby magpie shrike, and it was making an astonishing noise, trying to get its mother to feed it. But of course, it's too old for that now. Look, 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 look. There it is. There's one of them. That's the adult. See, it's got a long tail. The youngsters don't have long tails. Right on the ground there. And panting away, exhibiting gular flutter. Trying to catch a few insects on the ground. It's a shrike, so it will eat all sorts of different kinds of meat. And insects, I suppose, are conceivably meat, sources of meat. They'll eat mainly sort of termites and things like that, but they'll also try and catch grasshoppers. And at this time of the year, in this kind of heat, they'll basically take any kind of living organism that they can overpower. They live in a flock, and the rest of the flock is now being rather entertained by us. They're sitting up in this beautiful tree, one half of which is no longer with us. And that, of course, is a function of a time of stress that the tree once had. And we'll talk about that a bit more now. So these are communal nesting birds, which means that they live in a little colony, and one or two of them will breed. Well, obviously two of them will breed, and the rest will just help to raise the youngsters, and then eventually they'll disperse off and try and form their own flocks. That lovely, beautiful black and white color in amongst the green there. And they won't only be catching insects on the ground, they'll absolutely try and catch insects in the tree. Now, John Autry, you want to know about a long-tailed widow bird. Now, I'm going to get the book out because I'm sure some of you won't know what that is. Not everybody are such competent birders as John Autry. And John, you want to know about widow birds here and why they've got a long tail sometimes and then they've got a short tail at other times. It's actually a really fascinating story, I think. I'm just going to find you a long-tailed widow. I'm eventually going to find you a long-tailed widow. There we go. Now, Brian, if you'd be so kind, aim your camera and this over here. Thank you so much. Now, that is a long-tailed widow, everybody, and that is the long tail that it has. And quite unlike the long-tailed shrike here, which I think is very interesting, the male and the female are sexually dimorphic. That means that only the male has got the long tail. Now, when he is not breeding, that's what he looks like. So he doesn't have the long tail. Now, that tells you immediately, John, that the only reason he has that tail is so that he can breed. And like many, many birds, the peacock being possibly the most famous example, the males have these long tails or various kind of decorations in order to attract the female. And what a long tail does, of course, is make it extremely difficult to fly. It makes it extremely difficult to fly. And because it's so difficult to fly, what it indicates to the female is that if you can survive with such a hindrance to life, then you must have pretty good genes. You must be carrying strength. You're probably very parasite resistant. And so despite the fact that you have this amazing hindrance behind you, you're able to survive, and therefore you're a good prospect as a mate. And that's why they have these long tails. Now, nobody has satisfactorily explain to me why it is that in the long-tailed shrike, both male and female should have this long tail, which is not an aid to flying. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It makes it very difficult for them to fly. It produces drag. It doesn't increase their maneuverability at all. So I really don't know why the long-tailed shrike, or magpie shrike, which is what we're looking at here, has got a long tail. Anyway, long-tailed shrikes we will get in this area only in times of very huge rain, so not around here at this time of year, in this particular drought season, which has now reached the proportions of being the driest year since records began to be kept in 1904. So that's quite something.
Well, January this year was the hottest year.
Yeah, there we go. Now we've got a wonderful comment from a new viewer whose name I'm struggling to get. Olvark? Nicola, is that correct? Oh, here's some lion tracks. Alzark, I think it was. Sorry, we're in a bit of a dodgy signal area here for the radio. There are some lion tracks here. Alzark, you are to say, where have you been? This is your first drive, and why didn't you know about it? Well, Alzark, I'm going to have to throw that question right back at you. Why didn't you know about it? Why have you left us in the lurch for so long, longing for your company, and yet here we were waiting. But eventually you found us, and we're most grateful to you. So welcome. Please send us questions and comments. Lovely to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the drive. These tracks of lions are they've crossed into the bush there, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're the ones that Scott was following this morning. Now, what that tells me is that either the Nkahuma pride has split up, or another pride has come through this area in the course of the night. And by the split up, I don't mean permanently. I mean probably sometime during the night last night, for whatever reason. I don't know what that would have been. Maybe one of them is seeking out the Birmingham boys so that she might consort with them in a manner that could provide cubs. If you know what I mean, Brian. You know what I mean? Yes. Yeah, I don't think these tracks are very fresh. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but let's just go around this way. I don't have a bigger plan at the moment. But before we do that, the whole reason I came up onto this high ground, everyone, was to show you some of the amazing cloud formations here. And we're just going to nip into the clearing here so that I can show them to you there. And then we'll carry on. I think these tracks are the ones that Scott had this morning, so I don't think they're particularly fresh, so I'm not going to worry too much about them at this stage. Look at these incredible clouds. Isn't that unbelievable? Gee whiskers. Look at that. Hey? It's just quite stunning. Now, while we're looking at it, Ravi, you're in New York City, and you're interested in what effect the drought has had on the birds. Ravi, as you correctly say, there are fewer insects, which means the insect eaters are going to struggle. There are fewer grass seeds, which means that the seed eaters are going to struggle. There are fewer flowers, so the nectar feeders are going to struggle. And that has manifested in, I think, fewer chicks being born. It's made the birds a lot more quiet. There's a very subdued dawn chorus during the mornings, and you won't have unusual or very wet weather birds like the long-tailed widow normally comes through before the long-tailed, at least not the long-tailed widow, the red-winged widow normally comes through rather than the long-tailed widow, but the same sort of bird, but only in years when it's really wet, and that is just not the case at the moment. What a stunning, stunning formation of clouds. I'm going to just do a little turnaround, and we're going to just make sure that those are the tracks that Scott had this morning. I will try and show them to you. They weren't very distinct, though. So just try and find a good example, and we'll see. Very interesting day, you know. I thought it was supposed to be around 40 degrees. I don't think it quite reached that height, but it was certainly very hot, but very nice atmosphere at the moment. Now, Debbie, I think it's a very good postulation that you've got going here. You say if the Nkuhuma Pride is spending more and more time on Djuma, they're obviously 5 lionesses, would that attract the attentions of the Birmingham boys? And would they come across? Yes, it might. The females will normally seek out the males, though, when they go into estrus. So should one of them go into estrus, they'll probably seek out the males rather than the other way round. That said, it's difficult to know how the Birmingham boys would find these females unless they were roaring. And they won't roar unless they feel like their territory is under threat. And, you know, female lions don't like to spend a great deal of time around the males, and that is simply because the males, of course, are great scavengers. They are by far the largest and most voracious scavengers that we have out here. And so there's no real advantage to a female lion seeking out a male unless she does want to mate. And they certainly are not going to try and call them over this way for no reason. So I think you'll find that as they come into estrus individually, 2 of them have already mated with the Birmingham boys, so they will seek out the males according to their roars. Nice question, that. So my plan now is just to go to the top up here, turn to the east, go along the fire break and see if those tracks which went into the northeast towards us there, and we'll see if we manage to find them crossing the fire break. While we're doing that, Jamie is having a boat cruise at the moment. Go and enjoy the sloshing sounds of the water with her.
No water today, I'm afraid. No sloshing sounds of water coming through, but a beautiful drainage line nonetheless on our river cruise. Protected by the shade of the enormous tambuti and jackalberry trees that make this drainage line so very attractive. And I can only just imagine what it must be like in summer to enjoy a trip down this drainage line.
I have checked over these 2 lines.
Now what could be really interesting, and I'm starting to wonder about those sounds that we heard. Now it's difficult when a sound is far away. I said it was impala. I'm wondering whether or not I should be second guessing that. My instinct says impala, but my brain is warring with my instinct and saying, is there a possibility that it was the leopards shouting for longer than usual or growling at each other for longer than usual? And that explains my current presence in this drainage line. These are perfect pathways and highways, when of course they are not flowing with water, which must be incredible to witness, by the way. But they are wonderful, sneaky highways for leopards to go through. There's plenty of places for them to camouflage themselves in. It's one of those reasons, actually, when you're taking walking safaris, that you've got to be incredibly careful walking through drainage lines. Because of the steep sides and the lack of sort of exit points, you run the risk of trapping an animal in them. So you'll notice often when we walk through drainage lines, we either stick on the bank or we cross through them and up the other side and then back around. It's an important factor to realize, because you can imagine coming around this corner, for example, with there's steep banks on one side, and all of a sudden there's an elephant that you've blocked their exit from or out of the drainage line. They can't go up the steep sides. They might be able to dash off to the right, but what you really don't want is for them to feel threatened or cornered in any way. So drainage lines are definitely one of the most, in terms of game viewing and sightings, I'm going to check every tree, definitely one of the best places to come and look for all kinds and all manner of different creatures. Now on a hot day like today, it also provides plenty of shade, but it doesn't provide for any airflow, so there's no wind coming through for the most part in these drainage line systems. So quite often what you'll find is a leopard that's been sleeping in the sand might move up towards the bank, or might decide to sit up in the nice densely foliated trees of the jackalberries and the sometimes occasionally tambutis. We've discussed the fact that this would probably at some point during the year have flown or have flooded through. This is essentially, as James suggested, a river. But naturally with this drought, it's not something that we're actually seeing this year. Genevieve has actually shared some interesting information about a drought that occurred in the 1930s, that caused an enormous population explosion of grasshoppers, which is something I'm really interested in, Genevieve, and I'm going to go and look up the Dust Bowl, as you termed it. It's apparently what it was called, because I find that distinctly fascinating. Now, what we commented on this morning was the fact that this year in particular, we've had barely any insect life in comparison to our normal summer season, where you essentially can't move without an insect smacking you in the face at some point. Oh, or a branch in that case. Since I've got back to work, I've definitely been in the wars. I keep encountering strange injuries from different branches. Through the archway. I love that archway. It's like the entry and exit to this drainage line system. Genevieve, will it result in some kind of insect population explosion like grasshoppers or something similar? My suspicion would be no. Generally they occur after rains, but after what you mentioned, I'm not going to say absolutely not. I suspect that if it happened in that kind of circumstance, there's no real reason why it couldn't actually occur here. And while we drive through this drainage line, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes peeled in the shady, the dense shady spots. That's where we're going to be looking for those leopards. No tracks so far doesn't mean that they're not here. Sometimes leopards leave as much sign as, I think Steph's best description of it was tissue paper blowing across the soil. You can barely see their tracks in certain soils and substrates. Now, it would be very entertaining if we came around this corner and discovered Tundi and Tingana, because this is exactly where we had them mating a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, that mating was not successful. She's come back into estrus once again. That's fairly common. Leopard matings are not necessarily always successful. This is exactly where they were. But there is an animal here that would tell us if there were leopards in the vicinity. Oh, no. Sorry, we'll have to go forward. What a lovely herd of kudu. Let's try and get a view of them. Also a little bit nervous. So just quickly, this is the termite mound that Tundi was, where I found Tundi the last time she was mating with Tingana. Right in the core home part of Karula's territory. And it's one of those curious things about the human brain when you're on a safari. Once you've seen something somewhere, even though you know the chances of seeing that animal at exactly that same spot in a different time is totally unlikely, or at least no less likely than anywhere else, you cannot help but double check it for that sort of thing. It happens to me every single time. These kudu have run off. I've noticed that they were quite skittish. They've disappeared off out of the drainage line. And I wonder, Now this opportunity to be able to bring you these wonderful sights and sounds and describe the smells to you, these beautiful trees along the drainage line, leads to Rich Levy's question, which was, who came up with the concept of SafariLIVE and how long has it been running? Well, I must credit this entirely to the genius Mr. Graham Wallington, who is currently on a property at the moment, and this incredible idea that he had. And it started originally as a sort of an offshoot from Africam. Originally, Africam started up, if I could stand corrected on this, but I think it was around 1998, and at that point was sending through JPEG updates of waterholes. So rather than actual video, it was sort of photographs at the time being broadcast over the internet. And at one point was one of the most viewed websites in the world. The fact that people could log on to and get an update all the way in Africa and watch what's happening at a waterhole was something that took off at an astounding pace. And from there, it has slowly developed with its ups and downs, as any place, as any company does. But SafariLIVE, as we know it, from what I can understand, was running from 2006, with some starts and stops along the way. Definitely, to me, the most ingenious idea, to be able to bring a safari either to people who have been to Africa but can't obviously live here and like to watch what they a place that they have known and grown to love, or for those people who just don't have the opportunity to come out and on safari, to be able to bring you this part of our world that we love so incredibly much, I think is an idea that is unsurpassed in my mind in terms of innovative television. And the wonderful thing about it is because it's live, we can't script it, we can't plan it. I could come around the corner and find the leopards, I could come around the corner and find an elephant. It's like a live sports game. It's not the same watching it once it's been recorded and it's no longer live. Now, this is where I heard all of the sounds of those, what I thought were impala. There's lots and lots of impala tracks on the ground, so there's a chance that it was and that my instinct was correct, because there's no evidence of leopards coming through here. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, do we go left or do we go right? Which way is going to be the lucky road? I think, well, Jigger's steering has decided that we're going right, whether we want to or not. Poor old Jigger, apart from a universal joint problem, actually also has a slightly bent steering column at this point. But stunning clouds, bringing a little bit of relief from the heat of our day. Come on, clouds, stop giving us empty promises. Let me stop here on the other side of this bush. Beautiful sky. I'm sure that you guys saw the twin beams of light striking the earth. I wonder if they're telling us something interesting. Can you imagine if there would be leopards underneath in that perfectly highlighted ball of light? I've stopped here just to listen. Very quiet though this afternoon. No sounds of leopards growling at each other. And I suspect that it was impala that we heard earlier. Now, decisions. Where to next? What to do next? We still don't have a firm lead on where those leopards might be. So 2 people have said I should have gone left. 1 person said I should have gone right. Well, you know what? Actually, democracy wins. And to the left it is. Okie dokie. Well, who's going to be the lucky people who's told us to go left? If we find a leopard down this road, you will definitely be the winners of the afternoon. Well done, Chris and Painted Wolf. Let us see. Your word rules. Since you are outvoted, or you voted 2-1 in favor of going to the left. Let us see. And at this point, to be completely honest, since I don't have any tracks, your guess is essentially as good as mine. We now have to just get really lucky. I know that Brent is also out looking and out trying to help, along with Scott. That could be thoroughly entertaining. Now, those of you watching on a regular basis will be aware that Brent and myself have been embroiled in something of a competition. It's a sort of an unannounced, unofficial competition that we have with each other in terms of finding the cat sightings. And just between you and I, and Dave, you're not allowed to tell Brent I said this, okay? It's an absolute secret. Between you and I and the bush, I think that Brent is winning. But we have to find these mating leopards before he does. I know that James has been on the search for another one of our large cats. Let us find out how his search is going.
Now, we're trying desperately, everybody, to further find some more tracks of large cats. Failed thus far. We had reports that the lion tracks we had earlier have crossed into Buffelshoek, and that was Taxon who gave us that update. Pretty sure they were the same ones Scott had. So where the Nkuhuma Pride is, I'm not sure. I would be watching the Djuma Dam cam with a great enthusiasm were I able to this evening. So I think keep watching that and see if they don't pop out there at some stage. Also the Galago Pan. Anyway, we're going to move on to try and go now to the southeast area to see if we can't find those cheetah that were seen, just on the off chance that they may have come across, and maybe we will also pick up Karula, who spent a long time this morning licking up some of the most soupy green water I've ever seen. Now, Leopard, which is a wonderful name, I think. Leopard is a very good name. Leopard, while we watch that little Nyala off over there. Which seems to want to hide from us. Leopard, you want to know about the Birmingham boys and about a pecking order within a male coalition, and is there one, and does one dominate mating rights and utter kill, etc.? Leopard? No, not really. Sometimes there is a slight dominance, but that's normally based purely on size. It isn't based on experience or age. So if there is dominance at a kill, it will normally be simply the largest animal that wins out and bullies the others away. For mating, it seems to be, I've read both, and I've certainly seen more of one than the other. So I have read that in a coalition you'll have a dominant male that will monopolize mating opportunities. I have seen in large coalitions, however, once one male begins mating with a female who is in estrus, he will normally be allowed those mating rights until she then either comes out of estrus or gets sick of him and moves on. So he will go through one full mating bout normally with her. And I have seen with the Matimbas where one male was noticeably larger and one male also seemed to, because of his black mane, have a greater amount of testosterone. That would make him more attractive to the females. Certainly black-maned lions do seem to be more attractive to females. I think he probably would have mated a lot more than his brother did. And so, yes, there is a sort of dominance hierarchy. I think it's possibly based on female selection almost as much as it is on the males themselves, if that makes sense. Also, of course, in a coalition of males, you've normally got males that are very closely related to each other, and so they'll normally be very similarly sized, and so it's quite difficult for one to dominate any of the others. Very nice question, and lovely, because it means that there's a lot to discuss about it, which I think is great. Now, I'm pretty sure Jamie's done this road, looking in the drainage line for Karula to see where she may have gone. We're going to do the same sort of thing, and just on our way to the southeast to see if those cheetah haven't perhaps popped across this way, we'll just drive along here carefully, seeking out the dappled pelage of gold and white and black spots. Did you like that, Brian? I thought it was quite poetic, don't you think?
Very much so.
Now, apparently Jamie hasn't done this route, so that's probably quite good news. It means that we may be lucky along here. But lions I have given up upon. Now, a hot day like today, a leopard, of course, will move along the sides of a drainage line, often not in the middle of it, but along the sides in the shade, where she can kind of stalk if something pops along. Let's just look in that tree. Hello, Gerard. You were flying out to Joburg and then you're driving up to Pafuri for 7 days. I think that sounds like the most wonderful idea. Pafuri, for those of you who don't know, is a concession in northern Kruger National Park. It is quite possibly the most beautiful concession in South Africa. That's not to take away anything from where we are here, but it's a very wild concession. It's bounded in the north by the Limpopo River, and then in the south by the incredible river called the Luvuvu, which is great cascading canyons and great rocky outcrops. It really is fantastic. So, Gerard, I'm very lucky. I'm not very lucky. I'm very jealous of your experience there. I've been there. I've taken a walk there. I've had a wonderful time there. I was hoping Karula might be lurking in this tree. I just thought I may have seen a hint of a drag mark on the road back there. Let's just go and have a look there and see quickly if there isn't a drag mark. I don't see the leopard in this tree. Wonderful comment from Indiana James, who is getting sick and tired of people talking about their experiences about coming to Africa, obviously feeling quite jealous. And Indiana James, you say you might be going to Walmart this afternoon. I'm sorry about that. I hope it's a satisfying shopping experience for you. I do apologize. There is a drag mark here. Something has been dragged along the road here. Unless it is an elephant. Let me get out and investigate closely. Per foot, I can open the door on this deeply aged rust bucket. Now, please excuse the patch of wetness on my back. That is, of course, because I am sweating profusely. My mother always said to me, James, do not use the word perspire. It is very non-you. I've never quite figured out what that means, but I say sweat as a result. I'm going to put this over here in case I need to go a distance from the vehicle. Now, what you can see here, or maybe you can't, if you look along here, there's some very clear movement of something being dragged along the ground, and it's been pulled through here and down that way. Hello, how are you? Good, good. There's a drag mark here of something. That's Mr. Graham Wallington on Game Drive, of course, trying his hand at guiding today, which of course is an excellent idea. In fact, that's the entire brains trust of WildEarth sitting on that vehicle there. What is your route? What is your route?
Our route, it was to go to Buffelshoek Dam, but you parked in the road over there, which makes that impossible. So we're going down
You
here.
could go that way, yes. Okay, good. We'll enjoy that. See you later. One must perform well when the CEO is watching, of course. I'm now sweating even more profusely than I was before. That drag mark doesn't look very new to me. Did you manage to see it, Brian? Could you see it? So, I'm half tempted to follow it on foot. I'll tell you what. No, we can't drive down there. We'll go into the drainage line here and just have a quick look. It's definitely been driven over, though. Possibly a few times. Let me just plug myself back in so that I can hear Nicola Austin's sweet and sultry tones. I'm back, Nicola. Now, Rich Levy, you wanted to know who was the brains trust behind SafariLIVE? Well, that was it right there. Graham apparently has been knocking about in these parts for about 17 years, and I'm sure, as Jamie told you, WildEarth began, well, in its earliest guise, as a 30-second upload of a single JPEG from the Djuma Dam there, which I think is quite remarkable how far it's come since then. And hundreds of cameras, if I'm not mistaken now, around the world as a result of that initial placement here at Djuma. Now, a little bit in two minds as to what to do here. There's a diker looking very chilled out and relaxed. I think what I would like to do, everyone, is go and head off and just have a little bit of a walk in here and see if I can't find something. If I don't, obviously I shall cry, but I won't do that live. So let's head across to Jamie and see what she's up to, and I will give you an update on what these are doing in about probably 5 or 10 minutes.
Awesome, exciting stuff. So while James follows up on that drag mark, I've widened my search circle and I've come onto Mumba Road, which is also one of Tingana's favorite little highways to cross through, and Mvula actually, if I'm completely honest. I've also seen his tracks here and I bumped into him once. We'll just see if maybe those leopards crossed a little bit further to the east of where we first thought they had. Still no sign of tracks, so I'm starting to feel as if I might be on a wild goose chase, but I refuse to accept it. And I feel as though now I've promised Dave a leopard this afternoon, I better make good on that. Interesting. Drag marks going into the drainage line. Train of thought gone. Sorry, derailed, but it's a hyena track, it's not a leopard track. False alarm. It's one of those interesting things, that split that you do with your mind and with your attention. While we're talking and we're chatting to you, the whole time we're sort of concentrating on the road in front of us. Obviously, luckily, you get to the point where driving on these roads is second nature. But you also get to the point where you're focusing on tracks in the road, you're focusing on your peripheral vision, trying to make sure that you don't miss anything. And goodness knows, our regular viewers are familiar with just how cryptically camouflaged something like a leopard can be. It's important to kind of divide your attention in different directions. Well, that's an interesting question that's come through from Kathy, and it's actually a question that I do not know the answer to, but I strongly suspect that our regular viewers, who are incredibly up to date with the comings and the goings of the various leopards of the Sabi Sands and the greater Kruger area, I suspect that our long-term viewers might know the answer to this. So I'm going to put Kathy in a strange turn of affairs. I'm actually going to put Kathy's question through to you guys. Kathy was wondering about the half-tail leopard female and where she might be and if she is still around. Now, Kathy, I'm part of a group, a sort of social media group that follows a lot of the leopard sightings updates from the different guides around the area. And we get regular updates. I haven't, while I've been working for WildEarth, to the best of my memory, heard any updates about the half-tail female. That being said, I'm unfamiliar with her territory. I'm unfamiliar with where she came from or where she used to be, or in fact how old she is. So I'm going to put that to our regular viewers. I know Ellen Fowler and Raisa and many of the others will probably have a better idea than I do. And I'm just throwing two names out there. I know that there are lots of you on board our safaris that are very, very avid followers of the leopards of the Sabi Sands. So please, if you have an answer to Kathy's question, you can just send that through to #SafariLIVE on Twitter, or email through the update to questions@wildearth.tv. And you'll be doing me an enormous service, because you're educating not just Kath, or answering Kathy's question, but you're also educating me in terms of leopards that I might be a little bit less familiar with. I used to work much further off towards the southwest of where we are now, closer towards those gorgeous Drakensberg mountains that are currently hidden beneath a blanket of cloud, and by the looks of it, rain over there on the horizon. Come on, rain. It would be nice if you decided to come and grace us with your presence instead of taunting us just a couple of kilometers in a straight line towards the mountains. Now we've... Jamie, you missed that. I wasn't paying attention. There was one of our lovely battaliers that live along Leadwood and Mumba Road. I'm going to try and see if I can relocate it once again. Nothing quite as striking in the bird world as a battalier. But just while I do that, and while we're also on our leopard search, of course, and second name Tilope, I appreciate that, by the way. I enjoy your abusing username. And Tilope would like to know what is the size of a male leopard's territory and a female's leopard territory. And since our battalier has appeared to have escaped us, I can't see where it flew off to, I shall answer your question as best I can. So, first of all, it is let's go with a general rule. Male leopard's territories are larger than a female's and tend to encompass several female territories within their own. That being said, each territory is dependent. I see you. Here's one of our early warning systems for the presence of a leopard. And a little girl. There's a little female kudu poking its head out of the bushes at me. I see you, gorgeous. Apparently we've been seeing quite a few kudu today. They're such extraordinary animals with those large radar-like ears and graceful necks. And keen eyesight, and as I said, early warning systems. The deepest, loudest bark of any of the antelope species to carry through the distance. I know that Brent yesterday afternoon on the Sunset Safari mentioned that if you stop and look at a kudu, you'll usually find that there are many more. And he's absolutely correct in this particular instance. There is one hiding in the bushes. I don't think Dave's going to be able to show you him, but there is one hiding in the bushes off to her left. Antelope, I haven't forgot antelope. Make sure I get those pauses and spaces in the right place. I haven't forgotten about your question. I promise I'll be back with you in 2 seconds. I just want to stop and enjoy this kudu sighting. Eyes positioned on the side of the head to give it the widest possible peripheral vision, widest field of view. Important when you are a regular prey species for a lot of the different predators out here, including leopards. A male leopard like Tingana, of Tingana's size, would definitely be capable of taking one of these females down. And then those large ears providing the perfect all 360-degree hearing of the world around them. Of course, their sideways sitting eyes in complete contrast to the forward-facing eyes of the predators. I believe that Quarantine and Kanuma, actually, the one time that I have ever seen Kanuma was on a kudu kill. But both Quarantine and Kanuma, Karula's adult sons, her twin boys, both expert kudu hunters. Such beautiful, graceful little antelope. That long, extended head and a body built for being able to jump easily 6 feet from a standing start into the air. I've seen a kudu jump over a fence once before. Exceptional view. Having a quick nibble. Also one of the animals that will probably prove to be the most resilient in terms of their approach to the drought. Their diet gives them a little bit of extra access to the nutrients provided by the trees. Right. Our kudu's wandered off, and I should probably finish off answering Antelope's question. So leopard territories. As I said, males are bigger than females. From what I understand, Karula from the Panthera data, so the Big Cat Research Center that monitors these sorts of things, Karula probably has one of the biggest territories in the northern Sabi Sands at the current state it's in. Now that is because it is in this particular area. Now further south, towards, I don't want to talk about the silver cluster leaf that's in the road. Our regular viewers will know what I'm talking about. I'm going to just drive on as if I haven't seen it, even if it meant going over that enormous bump. Because last time I tried to move a silver cluster leaf out of the road, it snapped and I fell over. There's nothing like falling on your bottom in front of a worldwide audience to really put you in your place in this world. Right, antelope. If it is a more desired territory, and I'm talking about things like essentially riverfront property. Now you know that within human habitations it works something similar. The riverfront properties are the ones that are the most desired with the best view. In the case of the leopard, they are the areas with the densest prey species and the best access to prey. So in the southern Sabi Sands, around the Sand River, or within the areas of Kruger, you will see that the leopard territories are much, much smaller, between 600 to 1,000 hectares for a female. Whereas Karula in the northern Sabi Sands, which is where we are, has a territory of somewhere in the region of, I believe, close to between 3,000 and 4,000 hectares. So much, much larger in comparison. And what you'll see with that as well is there is a difference in size between those leopards. So the leopards that are capable of fighting for and maintaining those desired riverfront properties or riverfront territories tend to be genetically larger and stronger individuals. Karula's quite, I'm not saying that she's not strong, but she is definitely one of the smaller leopards. Her entire genetic line, from Karula down to Tundi and Shadow, there is a noticeable difference in terms of their size when you compare them, for example, to a leopard like Kwetile that comes from a different lineage, or she comes from a related but different lineage with a very, very different physical aspect. And our regular viewers, of course, will attest to the fact that there are clear physical differences, not just in terms of the spot patterns of each individual leopard, but also their overall physical appearance. And there's a very, very strong family resemblance between Karula and Tundi, who we're looking for now, and Shadow, her daughter, that lives mainly around Arathusa and Simbambili. So an interesting and quite a complex question. Thank you very much to Ellen Fowler. I knew that one of our regular viewers will come through for us, and Ellen Fowler is one of our viewers who can be considered to be an expert at IDing and keeping track of the different leopards of the Sabi Sands. Now, Ellen sent through an answer to Kathy's question about the half-tailed female. Now, apparently, she's not one of our leopards, and we say our with the greatest level of affection and the probably slightly broad term to call them our leopards, but as Ellen says, not one of the leopards we see on our safari. Apparently a leopard made famous by Big Cat Diaries. So I'll go and do a little bit of research for you, Kathy, and the nice thing is that I probably, between the presenters and myself, one of us will probably know a guide who works in the area that she was filmed in, and we might be able to pull some strings and figure out exactly what's happened to her and if she's still around, alive and kicking, or if age has started to take its toll. But thank you very much to Ellen for that update. I really, really appreciate it. Sorry, excuse me. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering how James's search of that drag mark went, and I think I should let the man in question tell you himself.
My search, I'm afraid, turned up nothing. I don't think that drag mark was particularly fresh. I walked down into the drainage line and I found nothing. I heard some crunching sounds and I thought, oof, there, a leopard is eating something. And then I walked a little bit closer, deeply excited. And then I realized that the crunching sound was much too deep to be the crunching of bones. And what it was is that hollow sound that buffalo bulls make when they bash heads. It makes the most amazing and very distinctive sound. Once you've heard it, you can't mistake it for anything else, except if your psychology is telling you that you're looking for a leopard that is perhaps eating something that it has dragged. I'm going to try and get over this, and we're going to take Hyena Road, because Brian did spot a leopard track heading off in this direction. Now, this is quite interesting, because Karula has been spending a bit of time in this area of late. Now, Rebecca, you are in Arkansas, and while we are driving along here, failing to find anything in the way of large game, you were watching yesterday, and your granddaughter had a question about the bumps that we drive over. And Rebecca, the bumps that we drive over are indeed man-made, and they're not speed bumps, although they do act as such as well. What they are is drainage humps. So it's extremely important that we drain the roads. Not this year, obviously, because there's no rain, but in years of rain, when the water flows down a road, it can create a major erosion gully. In fact, this road is a good example of a road that perhaps hasn't had quite the attention it has needed. And there's a bump ahead of us. And what a road does, of course, is it acts as a channel for water. And if you don't put these gullies, these bumps in, the water just carries on going, and eventually you have two rivers going down, and that results in soil loss and other horrible things like that. So bumps like the one we're about to go over now are in fact drainage humps to try and make sure that the water flows off the road. I'm hoping maybe, perhaps, on the off chance, we'll find some tracks going across here. Buffelshoek Dam is off that direction there, to the east. And we will fetch up there eventually, but I just want to slowly drive along here and see if we can't find something. Now, apparently, there's a lovely story here from Darlene in New Hampshire. You say that many people, local people or indigenous peoples, believe that hummingbirds are the bringers of rain, so colored the way they are because they have flown through rainbows. What a really wonderful story. Of course, we don't get any hummingbirds here. We get the evolutionary equivalent, which would be a sunbird, also brightly colored. So perhaps they flew through rainbows. They're going to be decidedly dull by the time next year comes, I can tell you that for free. Things are going to get a little bit taxing out here if you happen to be a grass or leaf eater. But that's okay. This is the way it happens. Here are some beautiful nyala, some youngsters, some young ewes, or cows, you can call them ewes or cows. Darlene, just on the subject of the drought, while we look at these beautiful nyala, which they seem to be maintaining their condition pretty well. They're looking pretty fat. You can tell immediately if they lose condition, of course, by the fact that their hips will stick out. But I think they're doing okay at the moment, so that's good to see. And just for those of you who are perhaps new viewers, this drought is now the driest on record. And indeed, as Brian was saying, the hottest... January was the hottest month.
Since we've been recording temperature.
In recorded history. So that doesn't mean, obviously, since the 4.5 billion years.